Welcome. Good afternoon. You are at the Minitex Network for Open and Affordable Practices Program Kickoff. The acronym that we use is MNOP, and my name is Greg. I'll be your host today. A quick look at the agenda before we move on. We'll do an introduction of the program for the first 20 minutes or so, take a break, and then we'll have our guest speaker, Abbey Elder from Iowa State. Probably another little break then, and then a little bit of time doing a Mentimeter poll, and then talking about next steps for the program. And now I'm going to pass it on to Minitex Director Maggie Snow for a welcome.
Thanks, Greg, and welcome everybody. I'm Maggie Snow, the Director of Minitex, and hopefully you all know Minitex is a program of Minnesota's Office of Higher Education, officially established in 1971. And since then, we've grown into a statewide and regional network serving all libraries in Minnesota with long-standing relationships with North Dakota and South Dakota libraries. And we continue to grow and change based on the needs of our libraries. Over this last year, our Policy Advisory Council, which includes representatives from all types of libraries and all 3 states, has refreshed our strategic priorities with our theme of connecting people to information, connecting people to lifelong learning, connecting people to resources, and connecting people to people. We are particularly pleased today to launch the Minitex Network for Open and Affordable Practices as it significantly moves forward our priority of connecting people to resources. As our priority states, we ensure libraries have the capacity to respond to local needs and serve their communities by leveraging economies of scale. One of our goals in pursuit of this priority is to develop a comprehensive strategy for shared e-resources. We have seen the good work happening in libraries and in higher ed offices all across the region in relation to open education and Z degrees, including in Minnesota and the Dakotas. And we know our comprehensive strategy of shared e-resources must include a commitment to expanding the use of open education resources, which promote inclusive and equitable access to course materials for students of all backgrounds. There's great potential in OER and affordability initiatives for supporting student success, bolstering instruction techniques and academic freedom, and delivering cost savings. But we also know that capacity is stretched, and in some cases, the potential for impactful change is better and more suitably realized through partnership and partner-informed practices. With MNOP, Minitex will help make these connections between people and schools across our region by facilitating collaboration and knowledge sharing. We can help coordinate existing but disconnected efforts and provide a space, resources, and expertise to develop the skills needed to support teaching and learning in the region. So we are excited, I am excited, to launch MNOP as part of our work to connect people to resources. So I thank you for being here today to be part of this, and I hope you enjoy your afternoon.
Thank you, Maggie. I'm going to go into a little bit about me. So I'm the Open Education Affordable Content Librarian here at Minitex. I've been here about 20 months now. I'm in the CPERS department, that stands for Cooperative Purchasing and Electronic Resources. I spent about 60% of my time on open education and affordable content, and then 40% as an electronic resources librarian, helping people in schools around the region subscribe to and manage their electronic resource subscriptions. I've been doing library stuff for about 15 years before being at Minitex. I've been in a couple of different academic libraries in the Twin Cities, doing just about everything. I wanted to share a few past highlights of work I've done with faculty instructional designers, as I think that those experiences are particularly germane to supporting open ed and affordable content. Back in the day, we'd build a proto information literacy module inside a Blackboard. This helped faculty with performing their assessment of learning outcomes for information literacy. And we developed these as integrated information literacy modules in Blackboard and following the ACRL framework, which I think came out just about that year or so. And then at St. Thomas, when I moved there, we started up a Leganto implementation, I guess, for lack of a better word. We're early adopters, and Leganto, for those who don't know, is a reading list management software. Required that we work with our instructional design team so that we could deliver this inside of the LMS. And then kind of more on the working with group side of things, I was volunteer at the Ex Libris Users in North America, ELUNA product working groups for a number of years, Leganto, and then when Rapido came along, I brought that one up and kicked it off. Just want to let you know, I do go the extra mile, and if I need to, I will dress up to get the work done. You know Hagrid over there on the left side, and then on the right side, every once in a while, usage statistics presentations need to be spiced up a little bit. So we drop by to sabotage that one. A little bit about the Minitex background. Not everybody knows the full breadth of Minitex. It's hard to sometimes, I think, keep it all in mind, but Minitex is a state-funded library organization located at the University of Minnesota in Twin Cities. The mission is to strengthen libraries, cultural institutions, and the communities that they serve. Started in 1969 as a pilot program called the Minnesota Interlibrary Teletype Experiment, Minitex. And the purpose was to harness some new technologies to enhance and coordinate ILL service better throughout the region. Just to give you an idea of how long ago that was, in 1969, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid and Herbie the Love Bug were the top movies. And then #1 songs were things like I Heard It Through the Grapevine, Get Back, and Crimson and Clover. Not long after Minitex became supported as a program, we brought aboard North Dakota. That was in 1974. 1974 was Blazing Saddles and The Way We Were by Barbra Streisand. And South Dakota in 1978. And that was Grease and Night Fever, Staying Alive, Shadow Dancing, basically anything the Bee Gees did. I think that was a good year for Travolta and a good year for South Dakota libraries. So after the pilot program and Minitex became a program, it started referring to itself in some of its promotional materials instead as Minnesota Interlibrary Telecommunications Exchange. All this kind of new technology and workflow required training and education. So Minitex is known for that. It's kind of our bread and butter. And that all kind of came along with the commitment to the teletype. We also had a union catalog infrastructure like the MOLS catalog and nascent OCLC things, and that was in the 1970s. We also started a reference referral service in 1973. It lasted 38 years up to 2011. Cooperative purchasing dropped in at 1989. That's cooperative purchasing of library products, things like tattle tape and equipment and electronic resources. So we do group purchases to leverage our size and get a better price. Databases for all Minnesotans, so statewide databases. Elm in the 1990s launched, and then we added eBooks Minnesota in 2016. The Minnesota Digital Library, 2003, sorry, that was beginning of support for digital collections. MinLink launched in 2004, 20 years ago. And then online reference for all Minnesotans was supplied by AskMin in 2008. And now MNOP hopefully is joining the timeline of history in 2024. So technologies change and time marches on. The teletype actually required dedicated communication lines. That's a line that always has to be open, and it's only between 2 points, A and B. You couldn't, in that day and age, have lines between each and every library. It would have been an unmanageable series of tubes. But the teletype, as you can see at the picture, probably always developing technologically. You've got the little rotary dial there. Maybe that's more like the first cell phone. I don't know. But once the teletype moved on, we were able to connect easier via dial-up. Minitex's coordinating role like Minitex didn't pack up and go away. Everybody realized that Minitex was needed to coordinate things. So Minitex continued. People who have used regional networks realize regional network can foster between libraries collaboration, sharing support, supply communication channels for people to stay up to date, and even some specialized expertise and training. So then keeping an eye on open education as it developed over the last actually 40 or 50 years, it's just been more popular in the last 15 or 20. There are legal developments like Creative Commons licenses that allow authors to better control their copyright, pedagogical innovations like open pedagogy, and just in general more interactive and engaging sorts of teaching, and technological innovations like platforms for OER development, and something that will be, I think, very germane going forward, AI and OER. So witnessing all the open ed efforts pop up in the region, Minitex wanted to help out. So that's how we arrive at the idea of supporting open education. We've got a website that's live now. You could check it out, MNOP.org, easy to remember. And I didn't come up with this thing. This came up, Minitex came up with this, and I applied for the job. So to show you kind of what their vision of this thing was, I'm going to just read through a few pieces of the job description. So works closely with Minitex colleagues as well as externally to create and expand partnerships with and between librarians, media specialists, and educators to promote open and affordable course content. Leads in building and implementing the Minitex OER action plan and helps to evolve Minitex-led programs. Creates OER-related instructional resources, including web pages, guides, learning objects, and workshops on open and affordable course content. Develops methods for assessing and reporting impact, effectiveness, and relevance of OER adoption in the region, and impact of libraries in the environment. Develops and sustains strategic partnerships and effective working relationships with various stakeholders throughout the region, and facilitates all librarians working on open and affordable initiatives with opportunities to share knowledge and questions. So in a nutshell, I would say that's nurturing partnerships and collaboration that kind of beget communication channels and knowledge sharing, supplying some instructional resources and training, maintaining stakeholder relationships and coordinating efforts throughout the region. So we're now duplicating, triplicating, and quadruplicating each other, and gauging assessment and impact of all of our efforts and seeing what kind of results we're producing in the region. I'm going to do a walkthrough quick of the website. Check what time it is here quick. So there's a self-assessment. That's kind of the call to action. There's core practice areas, a current awareness tool for new research, a network area, and kind of spread out is going to be a clearinghouse for shared resources kind of across the whole site. So I'm going to jump out and look at the website. So this right here is the call to action in the normal call to action location. Take the self-assessment. And I just want to say that this is a heuristic tool that I came up with. I didn't pull this from the academic literature, or it's not been validated academically. But what it does is it breaks kind of the big idea down into smaller practice areas, allows you to see where your strengths are and where your weaknesses are, and decide on kind of the next steps for you or your program. And then we have 6 core practice areas. So my idea is to try to keep the network loose and informal, so to be responsible and flexible, but there's also a need for organization. That's kind of what this supplies. These were arrived at through community feedback. There was kind of a list of maybe like 18 or 20. If you don't see things at the top level, they're probably underneath, like metadata accessibility. I would call them a sub-practice, but all the stuff is here, and it's grouped into these 6 themes: academic technology, advocacy leadership, author and adoption, discovery, metadata accessibility, open pedagogy, and program management. And if we were going to take a look quick into what this is, it's just sort of handbook level content that's going to get people oriented, and I'm hoping maybe to just provide a few helpful tips, things along those lines. When I came through library school, I relied heavily on the whole library handbook. I don't know if anybody else used that thing, but that had all kinds of information that I could not get without actually being on the job and getting experience. So if we go into one of these sub practices, it kind of looks similar, but then this is kind of something that I just created to OER search tool comparison. Really, you know, to do your best at a consultation, you need to know the difference in these tools so you can lead the faculty in the right direction. For instance, if it was a deal breaker that the thing that they found didn't have ancillaries, you could just skip open textbook library because it doesn't have a filter for ancillaries, and check on these ones that do. Similar for education level filters, that not all of them have those. License type filters, not all of them have reviews. Open textbook library, you can see the number of items there. It's maybe a better thing to do a browse than a search since there's not that many items. So that's kind of some of the helpful tip type stuff that we've got. And we've got other stuff like metadata. I will say that I've focused more on building tips and stuff on the site for things that weren't online, as far as having a lot of online presence of guidance on metadata and how to implement it. So this is actually fairly extensive, showing how to take yourself from step one all the way up to implementing metadata schema in your repository. Anyway, that's kind of just a peek inside. I'm going to come back to the front page here. And then we also have a couple more areas. This new research area is I've been keeping track of new research as it's coming out and posting it on here with summaries and giving it a subject tag. So you can come here every once in a while and catch up on what I feel is relevant to this program and its audience. Or you can come here and you can subscribe and you can get an email every time there's a new post. And then finally, we've got the network area, which has things like how we collaborate. So the listserv will have a list of events and meetings, how to get a consultation or workshop, and then some other tools that we'll look at a little bit later, like the OER course adoption registry, network directory, engagement materials, and this could go on and on, actually, based on ideas that you all provide. This is actually something that happened yesterday. Melissa, I think, might be on our call. She's an instructional designer, and she shared with me the idea of doing a list of Z degrees that are in Minnesota, South Dakota, North Dakota, and sharing it on this site. As someone on a listserv had asked, does anybody know if there are lists of Z degrees? And we don't have one yet, but we could. Anyway, that was kind of like, I was really heartened by that because I'm hoping that's kind of what happens on a large scale here, where people just kind of get to know each other and then start sharing helpful information and start building things. Back to presentation here. We're about at our break. Later on, we're going to hear from you with interactive polling. We're going to talk a little bit about how to participate in MNOP, and we're going to talk about next steps. So up next, go ahead and have a break. We'll sign back on at 1 p.m. with our guest speaker, Abbey Elder. Oops, muted. Hey, Abby. Go ahead whenever you're ready and test out the old share button and see if we can take a view on your slides.
Good idea. One moment. I'm also going to test out that the lighting in here is not there. There you go. Okay. Every time I turn on the camera for my computer, it decides we're in a yellow room.
That was
Okay.
kind of cool.
Share and all right.
Looks good.
Slideshow.
You
All
sound good.
good. Yes. Okay. So that should be good to go.
All right. Well, we got 10 minutes. We can sit back and relax.
Great job with the website, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
The homepage especially is very well laid out. It made me want to redo our website. And then I thought we can't do that every time I see a good website.
Oh, thanks. And you may notice it was inspired by your website too in some ways. So
Yeah.
it's good to be able to have stuff to build on, being a little bit more of a late adopter.
You don't have to build the boat. You can just look at what the other people have done with their blueprints.
Yeah. And then the other nice thing is like, why does their boat have that? I'm gonna skip that.
Oh, it turns out that that was a problem where in their state they had to have that or else they couldn't get the funding to move it forward. We don't have to do that. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. I will go ahead and pause for now then.
All right, y'all. Welcome back from the break. I'm so happy now to be able to introduce Abby Elder as our guest speaker. She has been the open access and scholarly communication librarian for Iowa State University for a while. I don't know how long, but when I started looking into OER stuff, I ran into her videos immediately. And she's also the statewide open education coordinator for Iowa, and wrote the OER starter kit and co-authored the OER starter kit for program managers. Um, Boy, I could probably go on and on, but let me just go ahead and let her take over, and she's going to talk about her experiences as open education support.
Right, there we go. Whoop, of course. Let me pull this up and slideshow. There we are. Everyone see my slides all right?
Yeah, it looks good. Sounds
Excellent. All right, thank you everyone for inviting me today. I'm really excited to talk a little bit about my experiences supporting open education at Iowa State and how you can apply my lessons learned. The original longer title for this was "So You Don't Have to Learn Them the Hard Way," but really it's about sharing sort of my experiences and how you can learn from them and apply them in your own context. And each of these things is going to be contextual, so what works for me may not work for you all of the time. So I hope that you'll think more about what works best for you as we move further into this. So before I move forward, I want to start by saying a little bit about what we've done here at Iowa State. So we've passed a student government resolution for OER. We've created a campus-wide committee with backing from our provost. We've supported an annual mini grant program that gets $30,000 a year to support faculty creating, adapting, or adopting open educational resources. We've developed a website providing context and resources for people on campus, have services for identifying, evaluating, or publishing OER, and enabled over 2.5 in student savings since 2018. But how did that all happen? I think that's really the big question here is, well, where did this come from and how did it happen in the first place? So my story is what I'm going to share with you a little bit today, as well as things that you can take away from it in your own context. First, getting started. So when I first got my job here at Iowa State, it wasn't necessarily, hey, you're going to come in here as an OER person. It was, hey, congratulations, you're our new scholarly communication librarian. And by the way, in addition to that, we really want you to look into what this OER stuff is. It was 2017. OER was just starting to hit that threshold of mainstream recognition more than it had for the last 5-10 years before that, when it was still very much in the early grassroots phase. And as this came into being, I was sort of tasked with figuring out how we might apply OER to our own university. So what did I do to do that? Well, first, I reviewed other colleges' OER LibGuides and websites so I could learn more. It wasn't necessarily an area that I had a lot of experience in. I assessed what was happening on our campus and what I personally lack. So where can I do more and where can other people do more as well? I applied for a professional development pilot around OER, Spark's Open Education Leadership Program, which is currently on pause, but it will likely come back soon. And identified other areas for improvement, like what else could we do? We could track OER adoptions better. We could connect with other current adopters and build incentives for people who aren't yet invested in this work. So as I was building out this sort of idea of where are we and where can we go next, this wasn't the only thing I was doing. At the same time, I met with our new OER committee on campus and we coordinated a panel of faculty who teach with OER. I presented to our student government on OER, what is this and why should you care? And they passed a resolution supporting the use of OER at Iowa State. And I updated my dean in the library on my progress, sort of settling into my position and what I'd learned. And she got me into a meeting with our provost to talk about what we needed to do to scale up our efforts. So looking at these things, you might be thinking, okay, that's really cool. You did a lot of stuff. But I want you to take a step back and think, I didn't do any of this work alone. All of these things happened because I came to someone else with the work that I was doing. I talked to our committee, I talked to our student government, I presented to my dean. And because of that, because I took that first step towards sharing with other people what we could do and what we were doing, that's how we got the ability to move forward and do more. So as you're thinking about in your own context how you might build in these supports on your campus and grow up, work around OER, I want you to think about who those potential partners for you might be. In the library, it could be subject librarians, instruction librarians, if it's not the same people, course reserves, scholarly communication teams, institutional repository staff, digital scholarship or digital humanities staff. And another campus partners you might work with are faculty and faculty senate, centers for teaching, instructional designers, online and distance learning offices, IT or accessibility offices. And again, some of these are going to be grouped into one thing. All of our campuses have different setups, but think about who makes the most sense for you to talk to about the work you're doing and where you might build out this sort of structure of support. So I want to ask you now, we had an engaged student government, a supportive center for teaching, and administrators willing to listen when I started, but who do you have to lean on in your context? So I'm going to open up the chat and we're going to take a minute for you to reflect on, I just shared a whole list of people you might think about, but who do you think you could work with if you aren't already working with them on your campus? Okay. Other faculty, provost and staff, bookstore, Center for Student Achievement, yeah. Office of Disability Services, DEI. And again, each of us have different office names for all of the same things. So what you might be hearing in one thing, think about what that relates to in your own context. Instructional technologists, yeah. And actual advocates in the legislature, which is always useful. It helps when they know what they're talking about too. Sometimes advocates who don't know what they're talking about can be the worst thing. All right. So as you keep thinking about that, I'm going to move forward to the next section, but I do want you to keep thinking about who you have in your corner as you move forward. The next section here is building on that support. So where do you go from here? And the first step is acquiring funding. So to build a program in the first place, when I started this work, I needed to get funding. So as I mentioned earlier, I got my dean to set me up a meeting with our provost and I presented a proposal to him. I said, here's what other colleges are doing around open education. Here's what we don't have. And here's what we can do, specifically emphasizing low-hanging fruit and additions that could be scaled over time depending on what he's willing to give us. And here's what I said specifically. I said, here's what we can do. We can join the Open Education Network. That's a simple just check mark. We've done this. And what will that do for us? It will get us training. It will get us a workshop on our campus. It'll connect us to a network of peers. And it shows that we support this work. It's something that other people have already done and would be an easy, just check off the box, we've done this. We should fund a grant program of some type. This will support wider adoption, innovation, and growth, use whatever terms they care about that they want to hear. And when I said this about funding a grant program, I specifically provided 3 models, scaled based on the funding allocated. I said, if you can give us $1,000, we can do a small incentive program. Say, if you've adopted OER, let us know about it, and we'll give you a little bit to help with the process. If we get $5,000, then we could maybe fund one larger project or a couple of smaller projects around people adapting or creating handouts or exercises or ancillaries to go with their OER. And if we can get $20,000, then maybe we could do something a little bit bigger. And here's some examples of what other grant programs have done. And he came back and he said, okay, here's $50,000 for your first year, and then we'll see what goes from there. We never got $50,000 again. We're sticking around 30, but still, it's nice when you can get a start with something that's a little bit more robust to build interest and get some people talking about what you're doing. But even if we had only gotten that $1,000, I had a plan for how we could implement it and use it towards some sort of outcomes. I also leveraged other partnerships on campus to keep building support. So I talked to our Center for Teaching and they invited me to present to their faculty learning community. So I could say, hey, you're already working on team-based learning projects. Have you heard about open pedagogy? Would you be interested in exploring OER as an addition to the work you're already doing in your class? Our course reserves team worked me into their referral process so that we could figure out, hey, at what point when you're talking to faculty and they say, well, I can't get this through the library, should you say, maybe there's a different resource you could look into? Why not talk to our OER people? Our campus bookstore shared OER adoption data with me that they collected from faculty, so I didn't have to figure out door to door or looking through their website who's using open educational resources in their courses. Our student government created an affordability position with representation on our committee as a part of their role. So it's not just if the student government president feels like attending our committees, they'll come. Instead, there is a specific position within our student government that attends our OER committee. And our digital press partnered on the development of textbook publishing workflow here. So each of these little pieces of working with someone else to get something started means that we have more people aware of our program, more ways that we can be integrated into other processes on campus, and actually get more interest in the work that we're doing. But this happened over 7 years, not overnight. Some of these things happened in the last 5 months. That course reserves referral workflow, we just finished it this summer. So do not think that because you don't have all of these things yet, you do not have support on your campus or you do not have something that's working for you. What's important to keep in mind is just you have options for getting this work done, and there's more that you can do. All right. And also, as you build these partnerships with people, I want to remind you that partnerships require upkeep, especially for student government, especially if you have students that are interfacing with your groups. They are going to not necessarily be the same from year to year. There's going to be a lot of turnover, and you can't assume that new staff, students, or administrators will share the values of their predecessors. So as you keep finding new people that you're working with in the same groups, it's important to keep up those relationships by talking to them about why what you're doing is important, how it relates to them, and figuring out new ways to partner in ways that matter to them. So the main instructional designer we had working on team-based learning left our institution. So now we don't partner with the faculty in that learning community anymore. But we have a lot of people working on scholarship of teaching and learning now within our Center for Teaching. So we talk about doing research on OER projects and how that's an interesting way to get more eyes on your work. As you're thinking about how to keep up these partnerships, here's a couple of ideas. You can develop a committee or team if you don't have one already. Build in time for monthly or quarterly check-ins with specific partners on campus that are of interest to you. Share updates at key times throughout the year. Hey, our administrators in these specific areas, I want you to know what we've done in the last year. Here's some updates that might be of interest to you. Share and reshare your partner's successes, especially for instructors. It's really helpful to have some sort of newsletter or working into other communications coming out of your library or other campus offices to say, here are the people doing really good work for OER, because a lot of the time this work that they're doing is a labor of love more than it is a labor of profit. So actually sharing their successes is really useful for keeping them on your side and interested in working with you long term. And you can ask what others are doing and support their success as well. So keeping up partnerships is not just about saying, what can we do to support OER? It's also about what are you working on right now and how can I help you with that? So for here, we work with our instructional design team a lot in their Quality Matters certification process, finding new faculty that might be interested in going through that process and highlighting the program. And a lot of the people that go through our OER grant program end up going through that process as well. So it's building them more people that they can work with while also highlighting the quality of the courses that we're developing through our grants. So I'm going to put it back to you again. How would you keep up relationships with key local partners at your institutions? Is there something you're already doing to make sure people stay involved? Or is there something you're considering as you think about how you're going to grow the work that you're already doing in a way that still honors the time of the people around you? Yeah, good note. The MNOP site's going to be a huge help for maintaining relationships, especially since you're across states as well, as you're thinking about not just within your institution, but building connections with people across your institutions. Figuring out how to maintain those relationships and share, here's what we're doing, is big. Lunch. That's another way. Yes. Having an OER committee that meets monthly. Membership includes faculty advocates, librarians, and people from the provost office. I do like the description of a guy from our teaching support unit. Sometimes it's just that guy down the hall. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Library sends a list of newly published OER to faculty monthly. Honestly, I should do the same, but I do not have the time. And we'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. And David pulling out the very important note, find new people that are interested and bring them in, develop those relationships. Okay, you guys can keep talking in the chat, but I'm going to move on to the next section real quick. And that is managing a lot of things. So we talked a little bit about how I got started and how we sort of built up the process that we had here at Iowa State University. But that work doesn't just stop once you've built it. Then you have to keep it going. So what does it involve when you're managing an OER program? Well, first, there's the idea of managing consultations. To manage the consultations process at our institution, we first had to develop the process. Okay, build a form, think about what people need to tell us in order for us to find OER for them. So we need to know their class. We need to know when they need this information by, if they have a specific deadline. We need a copy of their syllabus so we can get an idea of what readings they're currently using and what topics they're covering. And then we had to think about, well, what else needs to be involved with this besides me finding OER? So I worked with our subject librarians to figure out where the best referral time is for them. If they're someone who is being asked to look for OER, what's the basics that they need to know? And at what point does it become so advanced that they need to pass it back to me to look for more information? And we established a sort of referral system that worked for that. But at the same time, we're developing this process, we're building a form, we're putting it on the LibGuide. It's good to stay flexible because some people are never going to fill out that form. They're just going to email you and say, why can't you find this right now? And while that can be annoying, it's also someone who's a potential collaborator. So you have to find ways around working with them in the way that works best. There's also managing grants. So we got money. You might not have money, but when you do, it's a complicated process. First, we had to figure out how to spread the word. So we put out the call about our call for proposals. Exciting. Got it into a bunch of departmental newsletters so they could share within their own communities. We built up support around the grants. So not just here's money, but also once you get the money, there is a workshop to get you oriented to OER and to this process that you're building into. There is a timeline you have to fill out, and I will use that timeline to check in at key points throughout the year to see how your grant is coming along. And also, as you continue your grant process, there is a final report form and other ways that our team, me, can support you through that process. Also, managing grants is not something that just you do and then it's done forever. The first year we ran our grant program, someone created a resource and I said, okay, as long as it's got a Creative Commons license, it's good to go. So they put it under a no changes. Of course, we're going to have a license that says no derivatives, no changes can be made. It's not really open. So the next year we changed the grant program, said, okay, you can do whatever you want. It's under a Creative Commons license, but not that one. And then the next year we had something else pop up and we had to say, okay, well, you can do whatever you want, this license, but also please share with us a copy of what you've made afterwards because we can't find it if it's on a society website that requires a login. Things will pop up over time and you learn to work around them as they happen. Managing grants is a lot about managing bureaucracy, the systems that are built into your institution, and figuring out how to get around them in the way that still supports the most people possible. Because sometimes it is just difficult to figure out what works, whether that's who can I give money to, what can I give them money for, and where are the pain points. But as you get into it, you learn what works, and it's going to be different at each institution. And the other thing you have to manage a lot when you have an OER program is expectations. So what can people expect from you and what can you expect from them? A lot of the time when you're talking to instructors about open educational resources, they tend to think one of two things. They think one, oh, you're going to do all of this for me. You're going to find the resource, get it into my Canvas course or Blackboard, whatever the case may be, for me, and you're going to make sure that my students can get access to it. Or they think, oh, you're not going to do anything for me. You're just going to point me to a website. And usually it's somewhere in the middle, actually, but managing those expectations and making it clear what you will and won't do will really help people feel more comfortable with the process in the long term. It's also good to recognize your limits with these sorts of expectations. So, what are you willing and able to do for other people? And how can you make sure that you're not offering too much of yourself in the process? So, when I talk to instructors about OER, I like to start off with what are you interested in doing? What are you interested in preparing for your course? Because I don't want to share anything with them that is absolutely irrelevant for their experience. If they're just trying to find something, I will help them find it. If they're just trying to adapt something, I'll talk about the adaptation process and support we have available on campus. But I'm not going to jump into the list of all the things we do if they only need to know 2 or 3 of them. And it's also good to build in off ramps for yourself. So, where you can say, this is our limit, this is what we're not going to do, and having that written out clearly so you don't have to continue down a path because it's a service that you're offering. You can say, we specifically don't offer that service. I'm sorry, we don't do copy editing. I'm one person. Our funds can't cover that. I'm sorry, we have $5,000 per person. That's not going to cover a grad student for 3 years. But we can help people find other grant opportunities. We can help in other ways. So offering alternatives or other ways you can help people is one way to make the expectation setting less painful in the long run. And speaking of expectations and sort of having to build in those guardrails, there's a lot that comes into play when you talk about staffing and workload for open education programs. There are 2 sorts of things you might hear. Well, starting an open education program requires some dedicated support. You need to have someone that's actually doing this work and it's not just out of the goodness of their hearts. And also, there's no one size fits all answer for what your program should look like. Both of these are true. Some people will have programs with no actual dedicated staff or 0.02% of your time dedicated to OER, but you need to have some dedicated time, or else it's going to become less and less of a priority, or more of a priority without actual support in the long run. So finding a balance there is incredibly important for people who are especially building up open education work into their program for the first time, while also acknowledging that you don't have to have all the same things other people have. I'm not even an open education librarian. I'm an open access and scholarly communication librarian. That is my official title, while also being the statewide open education coordinator. So obviously, things are going to be a little bit in flux depending on what the priorities are of your institution and where you can make changes practically within your position. So the big thing really to remember is not you can't do something or you shouldn't do something, but just try not to volunteer yourself and your time to fill gaps that appropriately staffing your program could fill. In other words, if someone says, can't you just do this too? Maybe you can this week, maybe you can this month, but in the long term, it's more important to say, I'm sorry, I can't offer that service long term. We need more people to help with that. We need a student assistant. We need other people that we can bring on to support this work. Or why don't we ask if our peers at this other institution are offering a service like that and they might be able to help out? For example, a couple of schools here in Iowa are developing OER, but they don't have publishing software to do it. Well, we have publishing software, and our digital press specifically says we'll support any publications that meet the general subject criteria that are covered at Iowa State University. So if someone at University of Northern Iowa wants to make an engineering textbook, we can help with that. Think about what other support and other ways that you can work with people at other institutions to fill the gaps that you can't fill either because you don't have the time or your institution won't fill that staffing gap. So I sort of want to ask you now, how does open education fit into your current role? Is it something explicit, implicit, and how might you formalize or build upon that connection to make sure that you can keep supporting this work? And maybe you're not someone who is explicitly supporting open education at your institution. Do you have someone who can fill this role? And if not, why not? Now, that's a couple of big questions, so I understand if you need a minute. Yes, some people have the job title OER librarian. It was not so easy to get that job title in the past. And some who have that title are still only 50% OER somehow. Yeah, good note, librarians are primary OER support. So thinking about how the entire unit becomes focused on this, that might also be something to consider. Do you have a department that is working to support OER, but it's not necessarily one person doing it? Instead, it's built in across different people's positions. Yeah, good notes across the board. And this is one of those areas, staffing is an area where it's very hard to say, here's the easy win. You can just do this. But thinking about it and talking about it with other people about what have you done that works? What's one way that you've been able to make this a little bit easier for you is still helpful as we continue to think about what makes the most sense in our context as well. So next we have the question of, okay, you've made it. You made it into the OER space. You made it. You have your job. You have your program. Now what? What comes next? Well, next you have to find your focus and continue to build out and sustain that work, whether that is with staffing or with other ways that you can build in awareness and continued support on campus. So the first thing I have here is finding the focus of your program, finding something that you can make sure this is the thing that people know us for. This is what, when they think about this topic, they think about OER and they think about our unit program, whatever the case may be. So what matters to your institution? Is it cost savings, student success, pedagogical innovation, interesting experiences, workforce readiness, all different terms for different types of people? I know there's a lot of private institutions that when you say, why aren't you supporting OER? They'll say, because cost savings is less of a thing for us. We can't really argue that angle. But you can find other angles to talk about instead. That pedagogical innovation, student success, unique experiences, those are something that you can really pull forward and say, if we want to be the school that does this, we should be leveraging OER. Find the phrases and words that mean something to the people in your community and build interest in open education using them. Even if you're doing all of the things at once, some people want to hear one thing more than another. Yes, and good note in the chat. Good place to find those words is in the college strategic plan. Figure out what they're saying that they support. Here at Iowa State, we say we want to be the most student-centered university, so that's where we pull out our language for open education. Next, you can think about broader marketing plans for OER. Maybe you don't have a communications unit in your department or in your university at all. Maybe you have a couple of people that do social media instead, but you can still find other ways to leverage interest and build interest on your campus. You can bring awareness to your services. Hey, faculty, here's the support that is available for you. Because a lot of the time, faculty care more about support available than about how good OER are. It doesn't matter if there's a lot of really great resources if they don't have the time or ability to leverage them in their courses. You can talk about impact. Administrators really care about how they can showcase your efforts as an institutional project. Yeah, this OER stuff is cool, but how do I highlight it as something that the university cares about and that is coming out of this institution? You can bring awareness to the collaborations you have across campus, help people get involved by advertising service opportunities. Say, hey, you can get involved in our committee. You can get involved in Open Education Week. You can get involved in these different spaces. And that's a way that you can show that you're supporting this as well. And you can highlight your champions, especially the people that are already on your side. As I mentioned earlier, a lot of instructors really care about open education work and they want to be the people stepping out and making change, but they don't have a lot of support to do that. So uplifting them and making sure that it's clear you care about the work they've done is another way that you can say, this is something that we are doing here. But how do you showcase your champions? Well, here's some ideas. Here at Iowa State, we have our OER Trailblazers website where we list instructors who have adopted or created OER for their courses. We say, this is this person, their department, their level, the course that they're teaching in, and we have a short case study and link to the resource they're using. But you don't have to build out a custom website for your people. You can just host a panel, share a list on a LibGuide. Plenty of people have done it. Run a social media campaign with, did you know this class is using free textbooks? Great. Or prepare an interview series or video showcase saying, these are the people doing a lot of great work to lower costs for our students, to build more interesting courses, to share more information with the world. Again, think about the messages that matter in your community and how you can build interest in that way. Finally, you can recognize the small wins on your campus. As you build out your program and you think about, okay, we've got the basics. I've gotten support. I've found my people that I need to be partners with and sustained that relationship over time, but it's going to keep going. And I've built interest in it as well. I've raised awareness and I've marketed the program as well. You need to take a step back and say, how far have I come? What have I done here? This is kind of a big deal. Remember, small steps forward are still really important steps. Just one class using OER is worth celebrating because you know that they exist, and just one more class is an even bigger deal. If you develop a workshop and only 3 people attend, and I've had that happen before, those can become 3 new faculty champions. And each step forward will bring momentum for future successes, whether that's people that, again, continue to attend more workshops, who decide to join your committee, or just bringing more people in to talk to about this work and to share with others. So my next question for you is going to be, what's one small thing that you've accomplished for open education in your community? And if nothing else, you can say that attending this kickoff counts. I see the question in the chat, so I will answer that while you guys are typing. It says, what strategies for building interest have been the most effective for your work in Iowa? It depends. From department to department, the strategies have been different. For our engineering folks, presenting and saying, here's an engineering textbook that came out of Virginia Tech. Did you see how much impact this has had? Don't you wish you could do something like this? That angle has been good for them. Meanwhile, for our English folks, just saying, hey, here's a lot of adaptable materials. Did you know that remixing is a thing? Did you know that this is an opportunity for your courses? Really going department by department and attending department meetings has been the most useful way for me to get in touch with people. But across institutions, the biggest thing has been our faculty communities of practice here in Iowa, where across different colleges, we have people coming together to talk about their shared interest in OER. Something to consider, Greg. So what are your small steps forward, everyone? Azid agree. Some faculty moving to OER or free library resources still incredibly useful. Any step forward is a step forward, even if it's not for OER all the way. Funded a brand new OER. Biology classes have shifted. Excellent. Lunch and Learns with the Center for Teaching and Learning. That's huge. Just getting on a regular cycle where you are attending things and people are used to you being there is a very big deal. Because if you go to one meeting with someone, that might be the last time you see them for 5 years from experience. Being there every year and being part of the April meetings or whatever the case may be is really important. Okay, there's so many great things you all have done. So I want to say, please read through what everyone has done in the chat, see what all the successes look like. Because again, they're different types of things. It's not all we have a grant and we created a bunch of materials. It's also those little things of we got a couple of people to use library resources, to use no cost resources. They're still useful steps forward. And of course, that brings me to my questions. Do you have any questions for me at this point? I did want to also share, and Greg already did it, my OER Starter Kit and OER Starter Kit for Program Managers. If you want to check out the free books I've put out already, I'll share links in the chat later, as well as my slides after this. But I'll stop the self promo and we can just chat a little bit. So what questions do you have at this point about general OER things, being an OER person, supporting OER across an institution or a community? There's a lot of things we covered in a very short amount of time, so I understand. Melissa.
Okay. I always hesitate because I have a million questions, but I'll get us started and then I'll hush because I'm sure other people do too. Abby, one of the things I'm really curious about, I mean, Greg knows when he first started talking about the MNOP site, I said, oh, can we do something like what Abby's done in Iowa? And I love the way that it's so interactive and it's very community focused, and you're bringing in all those disparate efforts into kind of a space where people can see each other, that visibility. I also, and I know you work so hard, but I'm wondering if you could describe in a really practical way, like what does your collaboration look like? I don't know if you're the only paid person. Do you can you tell us a little bit about how, like, the structure, knowing that it would be different in different places? I'm just very curious.
Absolutely. So, in our statewide program or institutionally?
Yeah, I'm thinking about sustainability. As you pointed out, there's we know what turnover looks like and how hard that is to
Yeah.
kind of maintain that sustainability. Making it 7 years is kind of amazing. And I don't see you guys stopping anytime soon. So I'm wondering how you think about, like, your structure and organization of supporting sustained OER development. Can you help us think about those practical pieces about,
Yeah.
across systems, I guess, but maybe start with who pays you or whatever, and who works with you and who else gets paid and that sort of thing. Money matters, right?
Yes. Okay, so here at Iowa State, I'll start with the university first. At Iowa State University, I am our open access and ScholComm librarian. I used to also be the subject librarian for anthropology, classical studies, history, and sociology, but I'm not doing that anymore as of 2 years ago. So that's cool. Uh, Now I'm just an open access and open education person. Which is to say I do all of our support for open access publishing, open education support, and copyright. I also work with our digital press on the publication of open textbooks. So I am a one-person unit without a department head or department, but I am doing this work as well as I can. And I work with our digital press, which is again a one-person unit of Harrison Inafuku, who's amazing. And he manages all of our journal publishing for peer-reviewed open access journals. So I'm on the book side of things and he is on the journal side of things. On the statewide scale for Iowa OER, we are not an official paid entity. We are not supported by the legislature, the state in any way. We just decided we care about this topic and we want to meet monthly. And in last year, it's been 1 year. In 2023, I was given the official statewide open education coordinator label after coordinating our meetings for the last 5 years. The Board of Regents decided to give me a nice little, I'll say, $3,000 a year to acknowledge the fact that I'm doing that out of the goodness of my heart. So that's the extent of my position for the statewide piece. But other than that, It's really a lot of collaboration with other people across our state on that piece, where individuals from across our different colleges who have the time will attend our monthly meetings and participate in working groups. The folks at our Regents universities tend to step up a little bit more because we have more time built into our schedules for that. But we also have people at other colleges, library directors mostly, who are helping support our faculty communities of practice and talking to other people on their campus about how they might be able to volunteer or help with the work that we're doing. I try to not talk about my workload too much because most of my presentations are do what I say, not what I do. Get more staffing if you can.
We do have a question in chat about how to gather ongoing info and data.
Oh, yes, lovely. Let's see. How to gather ongoing info and data on number of faculty using OER, impact on retention or success rates, and whether use of an OER affects whether a student enrolls in a class or not. So those are 3 different questions, and really they're going to have different answers. The first one is easier depending on how this adoption data is carried out at your institution. So I know one person in our state who they are a librarian that manages pulling adoptions for faculty because no one else does it. So they get all of the textbooks information and uploads it onto their system for them. At other places, you have a dedicated person in your bookstore or in your registrar's office who carries that data out. So for us, what we do is we ask our bookstore to share the information with us. If someone says, I'm adopting, we started with OpenStax because that was easy. Said if it has OpenStax in its name, tell us. And then from there, we added a link in our adoption form for our bookstore where it says report that you're using an OER or other free resource. And then I go through and check if it's a library resource or an actual open educational resource. So that's annually how we get that information, but really that's part of the relationship building piece. Find the people who do get that data already and who manage that data and see how you can get the piece that is important to you. Registrar offices don't like sharing all of their data, so making sure you're clear, I only need to know if they're doing one of these things, or can you add a question on the form about is this an OER and we just need that information? That'll help out a lot. Impact on retention and success rate is another different question because that requires you to get different types of data and then collate it with the adoption materials. So you have to get 2 different sets of data. Who is in this class? What is the class using? And then what are the outcomes in the class? And potentially 2 separate versions of the class before and after the use of OER. So most of the time when you're doing those sorts of studies, it has to be planned out well in advance. It's not something you can just do off the cuff. But there have been studies done, and you can look them up online. I can't, other than the Colvard and Park study that everyone quotes from 2018, there are other ones that are more recent. Whether use of an OER affects whether a student enrolls in a class or not is also different depending on whether you have course markings or not. So if you have course markings on your campus, people can see, is this a 0 textbook cost course? How much do the materials in this class cost? Then that might affect student decision making. You can do a student survey to ask about that, but it's going to be mostly self-reported, whether they share that information or not. And you won't necessarily see the difference unless you have, again, pre-post data to compare different sections of a course that are or not 0 textbook cost. That's that first question. Okay, next question. You've built a wide range of partnerships. What kind of preparation have you found useful when initially reaching out to those folks? Absolutely. The biggest thing is looking at the website of the people you're talking to. So for me, it was looking at our Center for Learning and Teaching's website and seeing they've got this huge list of events that they're running with faculty and featuring these very specific topics, team-based learning, scholarship of teaching and learning. These are their main priority areas. When they're talking to people about what their staff do, they focus on these sorts of outcomes. So I'm not going to go in there saying, oh, instructional designers, I think you do this. I'm going to say, I know that your team is working on these specific projects. How might OER tie into it? Here's what we offer. So thinking about how you can also help them is a big part of building partnerships, because if you come in from a purely self-serving aspect, it's just going to turn people away in the long term. Thank you, Melissa. Other questions? I will say, if you haven't seen it already, I highly recommend checking out our promotional kit on the Iowa OER website. So we just put that out this year, but it is reusable marketing materials that are in Canva. So if you don't have a communication team in your institution, you can download them, change the logos, change the colors, do what you need with them to spread the word about OER. So you're not having to start from scratch. There are other things on the website too, but feel free to take them and put them on your website if you need to.
Abby, I was going to ask if there was some sort of a tension or anything between open education work and affordability work at your institution.
Yeah, great question. Less than you would expect. At some places, it's more of a concern because it's seen as a duality, but I think it helps when you start immediately from the place of we have a shared interest in helping save students money. Also, not seeing OER as the end point, but seeing it as an ideal. A lot of people I've heard from what I wish I had here that other people have is a structured approach where they say, are there OER available for your course? Then you can get it to zero cost. There aren't OER available. Let's look at other zero cost materials that might be available through the library. There aren't library materials available. Let's see what used or low cost materials might be available through the bookstore. And you work down from that. So you have a hierarchy of if we have this, this would be ideal. But if not, let's talk through other options and seeing it all as sort of a suite of materials that you have at your disposal that you can build off of, I think is a good way to approach it. When we've worked with our bookstore, probably the biggest, most important thing has been making it clear that we don't hate them and they don't hate us, but instead we're both working towards similar goals, and we need to recognize where our points of contention are. So for a long time, we've had some disagreements about equitable access programs and the idea that students should be billed a flat fee for their course materials. But we've agreed that if instructors in different courses individually make the decision that they want to do an inclusive access or individual course flat fee, then they have the option to choose that if they think it's best for their class. So finding out where your barriers lie and where you need to say, this is the line I'm drawing for what I feel comfortable with when talking to different partners is also important. And you can't always draw that line because sometimes it's the institution's decision, but figuring out what you feel. Our bookstore is self-run, which also helps a lot, actually. But there are some bookstores that are quote unquote run by Follett, but the actual staff working there are very good partners as well. So figuring out what it's like at your institution is different case by case.
And what I guess I had to have one follow-up for that question I asked about homework helpers or things like Lumen Learning. Do those come up very often with your professors?
Not as often as you'd think, in part because we don't have a huge base of people that care about those options as much as they did before. In 2018, that was a huge deal because there were a lot coming out all at once. And it was easier to find them. Now Lumen has basically locked down their system where you can't easily browse through everything they have available. So you can't recommend them as easily and people can't see the books. So it's a little bit harder to work with them in that way. There are lots of options now, though, especially with the OpenStax Technology Partners Showcase. So I don't think is as much of a problem now as it used to be, of people saying, what does this mean? My main concern with it has always been I don't want people to get confused about OER is free or OER can have a cost. Instead, it's the materials will always be free. And if there's some other thing you want to adopt with them, do what you will. Because that might be we use an OER in my class and I assign a reader that has a cost as well, or I have a course packet that goes along with it. There can be mixtures of things people use in a class by default, whether that's homework software or something else. And I try not to let my personal feelings get in the way of that.
in your crystal ball, what does it look like using AI or not using AI in support of open education work in 2 or 3 minutes? No, just kidding. You don't have to have anything.
What do I see as the future of? Well, right now, what I see is the future of generative AI in open education is almost nothing, because the tools themselves are incredibly volatile from a copyright standpoint and have other issues that I will not get into in the next 3 minutes. However, I think there is room for people making homebrew, small scale large language models if they want to say this is built off of our own collection. If OpenStax wants to build an OpenStax reader that develops self-check problems based on their curriculum, they are welcome to do so. And I think there's room for smaller tools like that. I do think the general application of OpenAI based tools is probably not a good idea, but I'll leave it there. There's only so much I can get into in one talk.
Yeah, it's a whole other talk.
Randy.
I have a question for you. What percentage of the courses at your school are OER no cost? And do you have a goal?
I wish I had a goal. I wish I knew the total number of courses we had at our school. We have 42 classes using OER, so it's not a big number. But one course on its own is a gen ed that saves students $60,000 a year. So I say, you know what? If we keep that class, I'm going to be happy. Instead of that, I think what's more important to me is thinking about how we can get at least one class in every college. So, hey, do we have anyone in vet med yet that is doing this work? Do we have anyone in nursing yet that is doing this work? Do we have gaps that could easily be filled by connecting with people in English? And those are sorts of the areas where I like to go into rather than thinking about percentages, because that way you have a person everywhere that you can lean on and say, what's going on in your department? And connect with them for more information.
We've kind of plateaued, and I'm just trying to figure out how to persuade more people.
Yeah, it's hard. It can help, again, faculty communities of practice is a huge deal for building interest and also getting the engaged people even more engaged and wanting to do more interesting things. But besides that, what I like to do is sort of get a buddy. So we have someone that we know is a really good partner in OER work. Do you have anyone else in your department that's maybe on the fence? Can I talk to them? Can you talk to them for me? And so it's the horrible pyramid effect, but you know.
Yeah, we've
What
made a lot of
works?
progress with sabbatical projects. People do it on their sabbatical. Yay.
Yes. Or if they're about to retire, I think that it is a huge untapped potential in people that are on their way out and want to share their knowledge before they leave, especially if they're on a phased retirement where maybe half of their time is teaching and half of their time is whatever they feel like doing.
Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you for the additional note, Melissa, for context.
Well, y'all, I believe that this is run its course. There's no more questions. Give Abby a round of applause on the React or in the chat. Thank you so much.
Thank
It's been really
you.
insightful. Glad to have everybody see and hear from our OER neighbor.
We are very close, honestly, on all sides. Do you have Nebraska as well, or is it just north-south?
South Dakota has Nebraska.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, everyone. And I'm very glad that I built in 20 minutes for questions. That was great.
Mhm.
You guys have a great rest of your day.
See ya. Yeah, let's go ahead and take a 5-minute break and come back at 2 for a little bit of interactive polling and just a short little preview of how you can get involved. All right, everybody, welcome back from the break. We're going to move right on into the Mentimeter poll right now. Here's the slide that will show you how to get connected either via your phone or via your computer. And in the chat, I've included a direct link that's easier for you. I'm going to wait a minute here and let people get connected. All right, here's your first question. What are your significant takeaways from Abbey Elder's presentation? Oh, that's good to see. We're doing many things, at least as well as Iowa. The toolkit that she shared. The maintaining the connections, that was one that I also thought of as making connections is one thing, and then maintaining them is quite another. Rome wasn't built in a day. Small steps add up. Definitely the incremental approach, I think, is a good way to go. In targeted marketing, I also think that putting a little bit of thought into marketing and doing it in a targeted way is worth it. It's a long process. Indeed. Let's move on to the next question. How are you involved in open education and affordability initiatives? Okay, we got an affordability working group in the library. We have a chair promoting them. I wouldn't say just promoting them. Promoting them is a good step. Coordinating efforts to staying on top of research and best practices. Ongoing thing there. Librarians have primary responsibility now. Librarians are on the OER campus-wide working group. Coordinating the work with the group. K-12s, that's cool. Librarian in charge, but also working with a team. OER committee. And group investigating Z degree. Nice. I think that we're done here. Oh, hey, there was one more. One of the instructional designers increasingly involved in OER design and creation. Okay, we're going to move on to, we got a couple of multiple choice questions. Okay, this refers to the website we looked at and the core practice areas. Which 3 of the 6 core practice areas are currently most in need of training, knowledge sharing, and peer support, in your opinion? academic technology, advocacy and campus leadership, authoring and adoption, discovery, metadata and accessibility, open pedagogy, or program management. Okay, did we stabilize here? Looks, it looks to me like it's kind of clustered around less than the nuts and bolts of the library work, authoring and adoption, discovery, metadata accessibility, and more about some of the other logistics and ways that we're connected with people outside of the libraries. And sorry, I know the audience is more than libraries, but you get caught in that trap sometimes. Thank you to the instructional designers here too. Let's look at the last question. Oops. So, which of the following activities would you like to see MNOP offer or facilitate? Just choose your top 3. I'll read these aloud. So connect smaller affinity groups for discussion and mutual support. For example, R1s and R2s, or maybe all the people using a particular bookstore group or a particular platform. Offer just-in-time, hands-on small group trainings. For example, planning your student savings report or developing a communications plan. Spin up large projects for the larger group to work on together. It's a big unit. So something like a core course curriculum mapping, which would be a lot of work, or creating and publishing an OER as a group. Offer asynchronous badges, short courses, and certificates developed in-house. Facilitate peer mentor program or accountability partnerships or accountability pods, and organize quarterly show and tell sessions. Okay, I'm going to summarize this, I guess, as well. The first couple got the most votes and talks about smaller gatherings or groupings there. So that's interesting from a program perspective for me looking forward. Spinning up large projects does have some interest as well. And then also doing some sort of training asynchronously, which is not always been the way Minitex has done things, but we are looking more in that direction with acquisition of Canvas and being able to work in an LMS and stuff like that. Okay. I think we're done here. Thanks, everybody. Go for that. Okay. We're almost to the end here. What are some of the tools we've got at our disposal from the beginning? This is just a very nascent program. We've got the listserv. This is, I think, what I'm going to be paying a lot of attention to at the beginning, trying to get this populated and active. You should note, though, this is a traditional listserv. It's a Google group, and its email address was created a few years ago, and the address is MNOERAC, not MNOP. And Casti, my colleague, did a lot of work getting this initial interest at Minitex going and action plan developed, and this was part of that. It's been a little bit dormant lately, but occasionally there's been a post, so we're going to bring this back into the age of the living. And then when you go to this page, just look for the clickable button that says ask to join this group, and that's how you become part of it. The directory. There's a couple things I thought were new ideas of mine, but then I see that these well-respected programs also have directories. So it's at least validated by peers, if not unique. And for instance, Abbey at Iowa OER has this sort of thing where it's optional, of course. People can put their name in, and this is a way for us to get to know each other. And go back here. Okay. And the adoptions registry. So there are also, some resources where in the region or in the state, they've developed sort of a database or tables. In Oregon, it's actually required by the legislature, but they've got OER that have actually been used. I mean, I know reading a review is important in some ways to help faculty decide, but like if they've seen that it's actually been used a few times, that should also tell them a few things about it, and they can see what kind of course it was in and what kind of institution it was in and all that kind of stuff here in Oregon. Oh, permission needed for those. I'm sorry about that. The self-assessment, we already talked about that. We'll not talk about that any longer. And then just in general, I know it's kind of amorphous still. We're wanting to keep this kind of loose and open. So these are just like some ideas. Nothing's been developed really on this regard, but just some ideas about the kinds of things that we could work on together. That would be, in my opinion, up to people saying that we're interested in doing this thing, and then we would spin that thing up and wouldn't necessarily be repeating ourselves year after year. We just kind of, I think, do what's relevant and what's needed at the time. Target, let me check the chat. Yeah, Melissa's talking about mandated course markings for schools receiving state funding. That's 5 different states have that. Sorry again about not having those permissions so that you could see them. So for me, just thinking about collaboration in groups and how to make a really rich sort of group that's working together, mutually supporting each other. I come back to this forestry conservation biology article where they say a system is not the sum of the performance of its parts, but rather a product of their interactions. And that's, I think, sort of how I'm looking at this as well, is trying to get there to be parts in the first place, but to get those parts interacting. We've had a good example of this when I worked at St. Thomas. The instructional designers were brought in to be housed in the library. And I think there was a hope, if not an expectation, that that would just magically start them all working together and doing stuff. But it wasn't really the case until we started looking into Leganto and inviting them to demos and asking them, is this LMS hospitable to this according to you, like your rules and all this sort of stuff, and working on other integrations within the LMS. And, once we had something to work on, then we did go great guns, making good relationships. So hoping to get you all working together and interacting on things. Sorry, I'm so bad at keeping track of the chat at the same time. The next steps. So sign up for the listserv, please, if you can. We'll be looking at some things that I've even been holding back recently. So hopefully it'll be pretty active here in the next couple of weeks. Help me make a dedicated contact at your institution. This could be a library contact, or this could be an instructional design contact or something, but I will be going around doing outreach, trying to find dedicated contacts at different places, but it's even easier for me if you want to reach out. Email me and let me know who the dedicated contact might be at your institution. We've got statewide surveys that we're going to do for assessing the impact, and these ones will just be kind of a baseline, but we'll go from there. Look for those probably in the new year. Minitex conversations, these are things that already happen. You may think of them as office hours. Those will probably be the first chances to just kind of like informally get together and talk about what kind of things that we want to do here. So I'll be continuing to work in the background to coordinate with other regional OER efforts. I don't think that we need to all do the same stuff. So hopefully we can develop a suite of complementary sort of things. And then once we have more information about what is relevant and needed, we'll develop some trainings and activities. Right. So I'm going to consider this program kicked off. How's that sound? I want to say thanks to MEC, the Midwestern Higher Education Compact, who have provided some funding to help us get this thing going. Everyone who took the time to provide feedback, and everyone who has already reached out. It looks like we do have a little bit of extra time. If anybody wanted to say something, you could raise your hand and say something. Otherwise, we can break early.
We're just all excited to go dig around on your site, Greg. So
It's good to see all the people I know and all the people I don't know. It's a nice mix here. Okay, well, and looking forward to getting to know people, and you'll be hearing from me, and hopefully you'll be helping me improve this thing, and it'll be up and flying through the air in no time. Cool, take care.